What did you do, Ethan? Claire's voice came through my phone at 11:47 on a Thursday night, thin and breathless, stripped of the polished confidence she wore everywhere else. Behind her, I could hear office doors opening, hurried footsteps crossing marble floors, and someone speaking too quickly to be understood. I stood alone inside Walker Precision Works with one hand resting on the emergency stop button of our oldest milling machine. The shop lights buzzed overhead. 12 workstations sat silent in the blue-white glow, and a finished titanium valve housing turned slowly beneath the inspection camera. It was barely 4 inches wide, small enough to fit in my palm, but Northbridge Medical had trusted parts like it for 11 years. Claire drew a shaky breath. Northbridge canceled the contract. All of it. They were our biggest client. Brent says you contacted them. I watched the machine complete its final rotation before I answered. I didn't contact anyone. Then how did they know? She demanded. There it was again, that tone she used when she had already decided I was guilty of being less important than everyone around her. I looked through the glass wall of my office at the faded sign hanging above the tool cabinets. Walker Precision Works. Black letters on white metal. Nothing impressive. Nothing that belonged in the glossy world Claire had built for herself. They asked me a question, I said, and I told them the truth. The line went quiet. 3 nights earlier, Claire had been laughing. That was where the story really began. Apex Meridian Corporation held its annual partner gala at the Hawthorne Hotel in downtown Columbus, a place with brass elevators, 20-foot windows, and servers who replaced your drink before you noticed it was empty. Claire wore a dark blue dress, and the expression she saved for rooms full of executives. She moved through the ballroom like she owned a percentage of the building, touching elbows, remembering spouses' names, and smiling at exactly the right moments. I wore the only charcoal suit I owned. It still fit, though the cuffs carried a faint crease from years of hanging untouched in the back of our closet. Most days I wore steel-toed boots and a work jacket with my name stitched above the pocket. At the gala, men with 7-figure salaries glanced at my hands before they looked at my face. Machine oil leaves a history in the skin. You can scrub until the water runs clear, but some work stays with you. Claire introduced me to 3 vice presidents, 2 regional directors, and Brent Holloway, Apex Meridian's chief operating officer. Brent was tall, silver-haired, and comfortable in the way only men who never carried their own toolbox could be comfortable. He shook my hand, looked at the calluses on my fingers, and smiled. So you're the famous garage entrepreneur. Claire laughed before I could answer. Be nice, Brent. Ethan has an actual building now. The people around us chuckled. It wasn't loud. That almost made it worse. Loud laughter can be dismissed as cruelty. Polite laughter asks you to pretend nothing happened. I looked at Claire. She lifted her champagne glass and gave me a small smile, as if I should appreciate being included in the joke. Brent leaned closer. How many people work for you these days? 5, 6, 12, I said. 12? He repeated, nodding with exaggerated respect. That's practically a corporation. Another ripple of laughter moved through the group. Claire touched his sleeve. Ethan likes keeping things small. Less pressure that way. I felt something settle beneath my ribs, cold and precise. She knew about the weeks I had slept 4 hours a night to make payroll. She knew I had refinanced my truck to buy our second inspection system. She knew every employee's family depended on those Friday checks. But in that room, my life had become a charming hobby she had outgrown. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I took a sip of water and looked toward the presentation screen behind the stage. Apex Meridian's newest medical control assembly filled the display, rendered in polished silver and corporate blue. Executives applauded as Brent described reliability, innovation, and uncompromising standards. Then the image rotated. Near the center of the assembly was a pressure regulation component I recognized immediately. The outer housing had been changed. The mounting holes had been shifted. But the internal geometry was mine. I had designed it 11 years earlier on a legal pad at 2 in the morning while Claire slept beside a stack of graduate school applications. Walker Precision's name had appeared on every approved version since then. On the screen, it was gone. Brent kept talking. Claire kept smiling. And I stood beneath a chandelier the size of my first apartment, realizing that the people laughing at my small business were already building their future on something they had taken from it. The applause followed us into the hallway after the presentation, polished and hollow, the kind of sound that belonged to people congratulating themselves. Claire walked beside me toward the elevators, still carrying her champagne glass, though she had barely touched it. I waited for her to mention the missing logo. I waited for her to ask why my design had appeared on that screen without my company name. She said nothing until the elevator doors closed. Then she looked at my face and sighed. Please do not make tonight about you. The brass walls reflected us from 3 directions. Her in blue silk, composed and bright beneath the soft lights. Me in a charcoal suit that suddenly felt borrowed. That component came from my design, I said. Apex has used it for years, she replied. That does not mean they stole it. The approval mark was removed. Her jaw tightened. Ethan, this is exactly what Brent means. You see disrespect everywhere because you are insecure about the size of your company. The elevator descended in silence. Each floor number lit above the doors like a slow countdown. I could have argued. I could have reminded her that my company had solved the failures Apex could not solve, that our inspection reports had protected their contracts more than once. Instead, I watched our reflections and realized she had already chosen which version of me she believed. By 5:30 the next morning, I was back at Walker Precision. The building sat behind a tire warehouse on the edge of Westerville, a low brick structure with 12 parking spaces and a loading door that groaned every winter. The front office had 2 desks, a coffee maker that leaked, and a framed photograph of our first completed aerospace valve. No marble floors. No glass conference rooms. No catered lunches arranged beneath company banners. But when I unlocked the shop, the familiar smell of coolant, steel, and burnt coffee met me like something honest. I turned on the overhead lights 1 row at a time. Machines emerged from the dark, heavy and patient. The first person through the door was Megan Price, our quality control engineer. She carried a travel mug in one hand and a folder beneath her arm. You are early, she said. So are you. I have the Northbridge test results. She placed the folder on my workbench. Megan had joined us 6 years earlier after leaving a manufacturer where managers treated inspection reports like suggestions. She did not talk much, but when she said a measurement was wrong, I listened. She opened the folder and pointed to the tolerance chart. The prototype passed every cycle. We are ready for final validation. I studied the numbers. Each line represented hours of work no one at the gala would ever see. Temperature changes. Pressure shifts. Repeated stress tests. The quiet mathematics between a product that worked and one that only looked good in a presentation. Send the report to Apex and Northbridge, I said. Megan hesitated. Apex canceled the validation appointment last night. I looked up. Who canceled it? Procurement. They said the new supplier will handle internal approval. The shop seemed to grow quieter around us, though the ventilation system still hummed above the machines. There is no internal approval, I said. Northbridge requires independent certification. I know. Megan closed the folder. That is why I came in early. At 6, the rest of the crew arrived. Luis turned on the large computer numerical control mill. Tom complained about the coffee. Rachel pinned a photograph of her daughter's soccer team beside her workstation. Nobody gave speeches. Nobody used words like synergy or market dominance. They checked their tools, reviewed the production board, and started working. 12 people. Brent had said the number like it was proof of failure. I saw 12 mortgages, 12 families, and 12 sets of hands I trusted near machines worth more than my house. Claire had once seen them that way too. When we started, there was only one machine in a rented unit that measured 18 feet by 24 feet. The roof leaked over the storage shelves, and the heater worked only when it felt generous. Claire sat on the concrete floor with a calculator, adding invoices while I adjusted the machine until midnight. We ate pepperoni pizza from the box because we did not own a table. She had paint on her cheek from lettering our first sign by hand. One day, she told me, people are going to know the Walker name. Back then, success meant surviving another month. It meant paying the electricity before the warning notice arrived. It meant Claire studying for her business degree at a folding desk while I filled orders 10 feet away. I helped her practice interviews. She helped me organize bids. We did not keep score because everything belonged to both of us. The memory came back so clearly that I could almost hear rain tapping against that old metal roof. Then Megan's voice pulled me into the present. Ethan, there is something else. She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a request from an Apex engineering account asking for the complete internal geometry files, testing history, and manufacturing sequence for the Northbridge component. The request had been sent 2 weeks earlier. Claire had known about the gala presentation for a month. I read the message twice, then looked through the office window at the machines starting their morning cycle. The corporation that laughed at my small business did not just want our work. It wanted the instructions for replacing us. I did not forward the request. I did not accuse anyone. I printed it, placed it beside Megan's test report, and locked both inside the fireproof cabinet in my office. There are moments when anger feels useful because it gives your hands something to do, but anger also makes people careless. I had spent 20 years learning that machines fail fastest when pressure rises faster than the system can carry it. People were not much different. Do not send any design files, I told Megan. Do not discuss this outside the company. Keep every message exactly as it arrived. She studied my face for a second, then nodded. You think Claire knows? I looked through the window at the production floor. Louise was adjusting a fixture. Rachel was checking a gauge under the inspection light. Ordinary work continued while something beneath it shifted. I think I need facts before I decide what anyone knows. That was the answer I gave Megan. It was not the answer moving through my head. Claire had not always spoken about my company like it was a stain on her resume. During our first years together, she kept a photograph of the original shop taped inside her office drawer. She used to tell people that we were building 2 careers from the same foundation. When Apex Meridian hired her as a junior account analyst, I drove her to work because our second car would not start. She wore a gray suit we had bought on clearance and carried a leather portfolio that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. Before she stepped out, she looked at the grease beneath my thumbnail and smiled. Someday, I am going to bring your company a contract so large you will have to hire 10 people. I told her I would settle for one contract that paid on time. For a while, we meant every promise we made. Then Apex began rewarding her. First came a private office, then a management title, then invitations to dinners where nobody talked about the work itself. They talked about market position, influence, and which names opened doors. Claire learned that world quickly. She changed her clothes, her car, and the way she introduced me. I became my husband, Ethan, instead of Ethan, who owns Walker Precision. At first, I thought she was simplifying things for people who did not understand manufacturing. Later, I realized she was editing me. Small details disappeared first. She stopped asking about new hires. She stopped remembering delivery dates. When I told her we had completed a difficult order ahead of schedule, she said, "That is nice," without looking away from her phone. The word nice became the shelf where she placed everything. About my life that did not impress her colleagues. I still believed success had only made her busy. I did not understand that it had also changed the scale she used to measure people. The strange part was that Apex owed its most important relationship to a night Claire rarely mentioned anymore. 11 years earlier, Northbridge Medical had been preparing to launch a portable infusion system for rural hospitals. Their original supplier failed final pressure testing 6 weeks before production. Every major manufacturer they contacted quoted 4 months or refused the job entirely. Daniel Whitmore, then the head of operations, called me because an engineer we both knew had given him my number. Walker Precision had 4 employees at the time and one machine that overheated if we ran it longer than 10 hours. Daniel arrived during a January snowstorm carrying a damaged prototype in a padded case. He did not ask how large my company was. He asked whether I could solve the problem. I told him I could try. For 3 nights, I slept on a cot beside the inspection table. Claire brought coffee, reviewed supplier lists, and called Apex contacts when I needed a specialty alloy nobody in Columbus kept in stock. By the 4th morning, we had a functioning prototype. By the end of the week, it passed every pressure cycle. Daniel stood in the shop holding that 4-inch component as if it weighed 50 pounds. "What do I owe you?" he asked. I gave him an invoice for materials and labor. He looked at the total and said I had forgotten a zero. I told him I had not. That was when trust entered the room. A year later, Daniel needed a corporation capable of assembling and distributing the complete system nationwide. I recommended Apex Meridian because Claire worked there and because I believed their size could carry the project farther than mine. I asked for only 2 conditions. Walker Precision would retain ownership of the core geometry, and every production version would require our independent validation. Daniel agreed without negotiation. Apex won the contract. Claire received recognition for helping secure it. I never corrected the story when people assumed the opportunity had come through her. At the time, it felt like marriage. Her success was mine, and mine was hers. Standing in my office that morning, staring at the request for every file that made the component possible, I finally understood how far we had traveled from that belief. My phone vibrated against the desk. Claire's name filled the screen. I answered. Her voice was calm, almost casual. Ethan, Brent wants us to have dinner tonight. He has a proposal that could be very good for both of us. I looked at the locked cabinet, then at the Northbridge component resting beneath the inspection light. What kind of proposal? I asked. She paused just long enough for the truth to show through. He wants to talk about the future of your company. Brent chose a private dining room at the Mason House, a restaurant where the menus had no prices and the servers spoke in voices barely louder than the piano in the lobby. Claire was already seated when I arrived, a folder placed beside her water glass. Brent stood to shake my hand with the same smile he had worn at the gala, friendly at the surface and measured underneath. Ethan, I appreciate you coming, he said. Claire tells me you are a practical man. I took the chair across from him. That depends on what you are asking me to do. Claire looked down at the table. She had changed from her office clothes into a cream sweater, the kind she wore when she wanted a difficult conversation to feel domestic. For 1 second, I remembered the folding desk in our first shop and the way she used to read contracts aloud while I cleaned metal shavings from the floor. Then Brent slid the folder toward me, and the memory closed. Apex is restructuring its supplier network, he said. Northbridge expects faster delivery, lower costs, and greater production capacity. Your operation has served us well, but the current arrangement is no longer efficient. I opened the folder. The first page called the agreement a strategic integration. The second page called it an intellectual property transfer. By the fourth page, the language became simpler. Apex wanted permanent ownership of the core geometry, the testing records, the manufacturing sequence, and every future revision derived from my work. The payment offered in return would cover less than 18 months of payroll. You are asking me to sell the foundation of my company, I said. Brent leaned back. I am offering you a graceful exit from a market that is moving beyond small suppliers. Claire finally met my eyes. It does not have to be an exit. Apex could keep you as a consultant. I read the next page. The consulting position lasted 12 months and could be terminated without cause. You already knew the terms, I said. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her water glass. I knew the general structure. Did you know they requested our complete design files 2 weeks ago? Brent answered before she could. Our engineering department was conducting routine due diligence. Due diligence happens after permission, not before it. His smile thinned. This is exactly why consolidation is necessary. We cannot manage a critical product around one man's personal feelings. The server entered with 3 plates none of us had ordered. Brent waited until the door closed again, then placed a second document on top of the folder. There is also a validation certificate requiring your signature. Once that is complete, we can finalize the transition. I looked at the date. The certificate claimed a replacement component had completed 10,000 pressure cycles at temperatures ranging from -20 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It listed Walker Precision as the independent testing authority. I had never seen the component. Megan had never tested it. This trial did not happen, I said. Claire inhaled slowly. Brent did not blink. The internal team completed equivalent testing. Then the internal team can sign its own name. Northbridge requires yours. Because Northbridge trusts mine. The words settled between us. Claire leaned forward. Ethan, nobody is asking you to lie. They are asking you to recognize that Apex has resources your shop does not have. I turned the certificate toward her and tapped the date. On this day, our pressure chamber was offline for calibration. You know that because I came home late. After helping the technician replace a control board, her eyes moved from the date to Brent. Something uncertain passed across her face, but ambition closed over it quickly. Maybe the location is listed incorrectly, she said. That sentence told me more than an argument would have. She was no longer trying to determine whether the document was true. She was searching for a reason it could be treated as true. Brent folded his hands. Let us be direct. Signing this protects the Northbridge schedule, provides your employees with a transition period, and places Claire in an excellent position for regional leadership. Refusing creates complications for everyone. What happens to my 12 employees after the transition period? I asked. Qualified people are always encouraged to apply. Apply for the jobs they already perform. For positions inside a stronger organization. I looked at Claire. Is this the promotion you wanted me to support? She held my gaze, but the answer arrived in the silence before she spoke. This could change our future. I closed the folder. It would change theirs too. You cannot keep making every decision based on 12 people, she said. That is why your company has stayed small. The restaurant seemed to lose every sound except the soft ticking of a clock above the doorway. I thought about Luis teaching his son to use a micrometer. I thought about Rachel saving for her daughter's college tuition. I thought about Megan arriving before sunrise because a canceled validation did not feel right. Claire saw 12 employees as the limit of my ambition. I saw 12 promises with names attached. I pushed the documents back across the table. I will not transfer the design tonight, and I will not certify a test that never happened. Brent's expression cooled. Do not confuse stubbornness with integrity. I stood and buttoned my jacket. Do not confuse a large company with the truth. Claire followed me into the hallway. Ethan, wait. We need to discuss this at home. I looked at the woman who had once painted my first sign by hand, and now wanted me to sign away everything beneath it. We do, I said, but not before I find out what Apex has already built with my name on it. Claire arrived home 20 minutes after I did. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the restaurant folder closed in front of me and a legal pad beside it. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator motor and the rain ticking against the windows. She set her purse on the counter with more care than necessary, removed her coat, and looked at the documents as if they had followed her home on their own. Brent thinks you embarrassed him, she said. Brent asked me to certify a test that never happened. He said the testing was equivalent. Equivalent is not the word written on the certificate. She crossed her arms. Why do you always have to make everything so rigid? I looked at her for a moment. Because pressure tolerances are rigid. Contract terms are rigid. A component either passes or it does not. This is not only about a component. I know. Her eyes shifted toward the dark window. Regional leadership would put me in charge of 3 divisions. It would change how people see me inside the company. And what would it change about how you see me? The question landed softly, but she reacted as if I had raised my voice. Do not turn this into another conversation about respect. You laughed while Brent called my business a garage. It was a joke. You told a room full of people that I keep things small because I cannot handle pressure. I was trying to keep the conversation light. You made me smaller so the room would stay comfortable. She opened her mouth, then stopped. For a second, the woman who once sat beside me on a concrete floor seemed close enough to reach. Then her expression hardened into the calm face she used during negotiations. You are asking me to sacrifice a major opportunity because you feel insulted. I am refusing to sign a false statement. You are refusing to adapt. I opened the folder and placed the validation certificate between us. Read the sentence above the signature line. She did not look down. I already read it. Then say it. Ethan, say what they want me to certify. Her shoulders lowered slightly. That Walker Precision supervised the testing. We did not. Apex has engineers. Then one of them can sign. Northbridge will not accept that. Why not? She stared at me, and in that pause I knew she understood more than she had admitted. Northbridge did not merely prefer my approval. Their agreement required it. My name was not decoration at the bottom of a report. It was part of the structure holding the contract together. Brent believes the requirement is outdated, she said. Brent believes the requirement is inconvenient. I closed the folder again. Those are not the same thing. Claire walked to the counter and poured herself a glass of water. Her hand trembled just enough to make the ice touch the glass. What happens if you refuse? Apex submits honest results or delays production. And if the delay costs them the Northbridge account, then they should not have removed validation from the schedule. She turned toward me. You know what that contract means to my division. I know what an untested component could mean to the people who depend on it. The room became still. I did not accuse her of choosing a promotion over safety. I did not need to. Some truths become louder when nobody names them. I cannot make you sign, she said at last. No, but do not expect me to defend this decision at work. I stopped expecting that at the gala. I carried the folder into my office and photographed every page. Then I sent copies to Robert Gaines, the attorney who had helped form Walker Precision 16 years earlier. My message contained no accusation, only dates, names, and a request to preserve the documents. Robert replied 10 minutes later. Do not sign anything. Save every communication. Call me in the morning. Claire slept in the guest room. I stayed at my desk until after midnight, reviewing the original Northbridge agreement and every amendment attached to it. The language was clear. Walker Precision retained the design. Walker Precision controlled validation. Any manufacturing change required written approval from both Northbridge and me. At 6:15 the next morning, Megan called before I reached the shop. Someone tried to access the design server at 2:13, she said. Did they get in? No. The authentication failed 3 times, then the request stopped. Save the logs. Already done. There is more. When I arrived, she was waiting in the office with a printed shipping record. Apex had ordered 40 prototype housings from a supplier in Indiana 3 weeks earlier, using a project code tied to Northbridge. The shipment had arrived the previous afternoon. They built the replacement before asking you to transfer the design, Megan said. I read the supplier description twice. Revised pressure housing, customer geometry, internal validation. Apex had not offered to purchase my work. They had already copied what they believed they needed and wanted my signature to make it legitimate. Can we prove the geometry came from our files? I asked. Not yet, but the dimensions shown on the purchase order match our last revision within 1/10,000th of an inch. She opened another report. Their material choice is wrong. It expands too much at high temperature. That is why our design uses the more expensive alloy. What happens during a full cycle? The seal may drift outside tolerance. I looked through the glass at my crew beginning another ordinary morning. Brent had called my company too small to carry the future. Yet his corporation had rushed a copied design into production without understanding why it worked. My computer chimed. A new message appeared from Daniel Whitmore at Northbridge Medical. The subject line contained 5 words. Independent validation required before shipment. I opened Daniel Whitmore's message and read it twice before calling him. He answered on the second ring. His voice sounded older than I remembered, but the comm authority had not changed. Ethan, I received a notice from Apex saying your company approved a new production method. Did you? No, silence held the line for half a second. Did Walker Precision test the replacement component? No. Did you authorize anyone else to use your validation mark? No. I heard paper moving on his end. Then we have a serious problem. Daniel asked me to explain only what I could document. I gave him the canceled appointment, the false certificate, the attempted server access, and the shipping record Megan had found. I did not mention Claire's promotion. I did not describe Brent's smile at dinner. Personal pain had no place inside an engineering report. Facts were enough. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, send everything to our compliance office. Do not send it through Apex. Daniel, before this goes further, you should know Claire is involved in the division. Is she involved in the testing? I do not know. Then we will determine what she knew and when she knew it. His answer was clean and difficult. It left no room for marriage to soften procedure. There is something else you need to understand, he continued. Apex has been telling our board that Walker Precision is a routine subcontractor. I looked through my office window at Megan reviewing measurements beside the inspection station. That is not what the agreement says. No, it is not. Daniel opened the original contract while we spoke. 11 years earlier, when Northbridge had accepted my first pressure assembly, its legal team had added a clause protecting the design and the validation process. I remembered signing it, but I had not thought about the exact language in years. Daniel read it slowly. Walker Precision Works remained the independent technical authority for the core pressure regulation system. Any change in geometry, alloy, machining sequence, or supplier required my written approval. Without it, Northbridge could suspend shipment, demand an audit, or terminate the full supply agreement. The clause did not describe my company as optional. It made us part of the foundation. Brent cannot replace you by changing a purchase order, Daniel said. He would need our written approval and yours. I leaned back in my chair. The building around me still looked small. The coffee maker still leaked. The loading door still groaned when the wind came from the west. Yet somewhere inside a glass tower, executives had built a multi-million-dollar plan on the assumption that size erased language from a contract. What happens now? I asked. You send the records. We freeze the shipment. Apex gets 72 hours to produce every test. Result, design authorization, and manufacturing log connected to the replacement. And if they cannot, then the board decides whether the relationship continues. The call ended, and I sat quietly for several minutes. I did not feel victorious. Victory belongs to games. This was a product people trusted, 12 jobs I had promised to protect, and a marriage beginning to sound like two sides of a deposition. Megan stepped into the office. What did Northbridge say? They are opening an audit. She nodded once. Then we need clean records. For the next 4 hours, we built a timeline. Every approved drawing, every test cycle, every email from Apex, every login attempt. We saved original files, created verified copies, and documented who handled each record. At 11:30, Robert Gaines arrived wearing a brown overcoat and carrying the same leather briefcase he had owned when he filed our incorporation papers. He reviewed the contract, adjusted his glasses, and looked at me over the top of the page. They underestimated 2 things, he said. The first is this clause. The second is that you kept records like an engineer instead of an angry husband. My phone rang before I could answer. Claire. I let it ring once, then accepted. Northbridge froze the shipment, she said. Her voice was low and controlled, but I could hear office noise behind her. Brent says you triggered an audit. Northbridge triggered it after asking whether I approved the new component. You could have called me first. You brought me a certificate for a test. That never happened. I did not create that document. But you asked me to sign it. The line went quiet. Then she said, Brent wants you at Apex at 4 o'clock. Legal will be there. Robert shook his head before I even looked at him. Any meeting goes through counsel, I said. Claire exhaled sharply. You are bringing a lawyer into this? Apex brought legal language into our kitchen. Do you understand what this could cost my division? Do you understand what your division tried to ship? Her voice softened, but only slightly. Ethan, please. There has to be a way to contain this. I looked at the original agreement on my desk, and the clause Apex had treated like an inconvenience. There was, I said. They could have told the truth before Northbridge asked. At 2:16 that afternoon, the formal audit notice arrived. Apex Meridian had 72 hours to explain how it manufactured a protected design, who approved the material change, and why Walker Precision's name appeared on testing that Walker Precision never performed. At the bottom of the notice was the consequence Brent had believed my small company could never create. All Northbridge payments to Apex were suspended immediately. The payment suspension reached Apex before the audit team did, and by 3 o'clock the company had stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. Robert and I were reviewing manufacturing records when Claire called again. This time, there was no anger in her voice. Only strain. Brent says Northbridge could withhold more than $40 million this quarter. I looked at the stack of documents on my desk. Then he should focus on answering their questions. He says you can stop the audit. I cannot. Daniel trusts you. That is why I will not ask him to ignore false records. She lowered her voice. Ethan, people are already talking about shutting down my division. Your division approved production before independent validation. I did not approve the material. Did you know Apex had chosen another supplier? She did not answer immediately. The delay felt heavier than a confession. Brent told me it was a contingency plan, she said. When, 3 weeks ago, that placed her knowledge before the gala, before the dinner, and before she accused me of seeing disrespect where none existed. I rested my hand against the edge of the desk. The wood was cool beneath my palm. Did you know they had copied the geometry? I knew engineering had created a compatible version. Compatible with what? Your system. Using whose measurements? Another silence. I did not ask, she said. For words. Quiet, careful, and more revealing than anything Brent had placed in front of me. Claire had built her career by asking precise questions. She noticed missing figures in budgets, weak language in proposals, and hesitation during negotiations. She had not failed to ask. She had decided the answer might interfere with what she wanted. Northbridge will ask, I said. You need to tell them the truth. And destroy everything I worked for? The truth did not create this problem. That is easy for you to say. Your company is protected. I looked through the office glass at Megan sealing verified copies of the server logs. Luis was loading steel blanks onto a cart. Rachel was checking shipment labels. Protected was not the word I would have chosen. One legal fight could consume years of profit. One canceled order could force decisions I had spent my life avoiding. Nothing here is protected, I said. The difference is that I will not protect it with a lie. She ended the call without saying goodbye. At 4:30, Apex sent Robert a formal demand ordering Walker Precision to release every design file connected to Northbridge. The letter claimed Apex possessed a permanent manufacturing license under an old supplier amendment. Robert read the document once, then reached for the original agreement. They are relying on Section 12, he said. Section 12 covers production drawings approved for a specific purchase order. It does not transfer ownership. Will Northbridge see that? Northbridge wrote the clause. He placed both documents side by side. Apex had quoted only the first sentence and omitted the two sentences limiting its use. It was not a convincing argument. It was a delay dressed in legal language. Megan entered with another printed log. The failed server access came from an Apex engineering address, she said. Can you identify the user? Not from our side, but Northbridge can request their internal records. Robert added the page to the evidence file. That request will be in the first audit meeting tomorrow. The 72-hour deadline had begun to feel less like a clock and more like pressure inside a sealed chamber. Every hour produced another document. Every document narrowed the space Apex had left to explain itself. At 7 that evening, I drove home through steady rain. Claire's car was in the driveway, but the downstairs. Lights were off. I found her at the kitchen table with her company identification card beside a cold cup of coffee. Without makeup, tailored clothes, or an audience, she looked exhausted rather than powerful. Brent wants me to testify that you approved preliminary production verbally, she said. I remained standing near the doorway. Did I? No, then what are you asking me? She looked at the identification card. He says if I refuse, he will tell the board that I brought you into the contract and failed to manage the relationship. You did bring Apex into the contract. Through you. Yes. Her eyes lifted. Why did you never tell anyone that? Because I thought helping you was helping us. The refrigerator motor clicked off, leaving the kitchen unnaturally quiet. Claire pressed both hands around the coffee cup. You could tell Daniel this was a communication failure. You could say the certification was sent too early. Apex would correct the records, and everyone could move forward. The replacement housings were already manufactured. They have not been shipped. Because Northbridge stopped them. Then no harm was done. I sat across from her. That is what Brent needs you to believe. That a lie only matters after someone pays for it. She looked away. I am asking you to be practical. No. You are asking me to be silent. For once. The words came out sharper than she intended. She closed her eyes, but they were already between us. I thought about the gala, the restaurant, and every year I had allowed her to describe my work as smaller than it was because correcting her seemed less important than keeping peace. I have been silent for years, I said. That is why you think you can speak for me now. Her face changed. Not anger. Recognition. Before she could answer, my phone vibrated on the table. The message came from Daniel. Northbridge had completed its first document review. The copy geometry matched Walker Precision's protected design, and Apex's internal testing files contained no record of the 10,000 cycles listed on the certificate. A mandatory executive hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock the next morning. Daniel's final sentence was only 6 words. Bring the original contract and everything else. The Northbridge hearing began at 9 o'clock inside Apex Meridian's executive conference room, 42 floors above downtown Columbus. Robert sat beside me with the original contract, verified server logs, and testing records arranged in 3 neat folders. Across the table, Brent Holloway was flanked by 2 attorneys, the head of engineering, and Claire. She wore a gray suit and the same controlled expression she had used during every difficult conversation of our marriage. Daniel Whitmore appeared on the wall screen with 3 Northbridge board members and a compliance officer. No one offered coffee. No one discussed the weather. Daniel opened the meeting by asking one question. Who authorized Apex to manufacture the replacement pressure housing? Brent folded his hands. Our supplier agreement granted us production rights, and Mr. Walker verbally supported the transition. Robert did not move. I looked directly at Daniel. I gave no verbal approval. Brent turned toward me. You attended multiple discussions about increasing capacity. Discussing capacity is not permission to copy protected geometry. One of the Apex attorneys opened a binder. The design was independently developed by our engineering department. Megan's comparison report appeared on the screen. 2 sets of dimensions sat side by side. Every internal angle, pressure channel, and seal location matched my latest revision within 1/10,000th of an inch. Even a minor machining correction I had added 18 months earlier appeared in Apex's version. Daniel looked toward the head of engineering. How did your team independently reproduce a correction that was never published? The man adjusted his glasses. We received reference data through procurement. From whom? He looked at Brent. The silence that followed was not dramatic. It was administrative, which made it worse. It was the silence of people realizing that every word would become part of a permanent record. Daniel moved to the next issue. Where are the results for the 10,000 pressure cycles listed on the certificate? Brent answered. Quickly. The testing was performed under an accelerated internal protocol. The Northbridge compliance officer shared Apex's laboratory schedule. The pressure chamber had been reserved for other projects during every date listed on the certificate. There were no raw measurements, no calibration records, and no operator signatures. Only a completed summary carrying Walker Precision's name. Mr. Walker, Daniel said, did your company prepare this report? No. Did your company test the component? No. Did your company authorize use of its validation mark? No. 3 answers. Nothing raised. Nothing added. Facts did not need volume. Brent leaned forward. Northbridge is allowing a small supplier to hold a national distribution system hostage over technical paperwork. Daniel's face remained still. This is not paperwork. It is the process that confirms the product performs as promised. Apex has greater resources, greater capacity, and a larger engineering staff than Walker Precision. Then Apex should have had no difficulty producing honest test results. Brent's expression tightened. We cannot build a major program around one small machine shop. Daniel reached off screen and returned holding an old photograph. He placed it beneath his camera. The image showed me 11 years earlier, standing inside our first shop beside a battered pressure chamber. Claire was visible near the back, holding 2 paper coffee cups. Between us sat the original Northbridge prototype. This small machine shop rescued our program when every large supplier refused the deadline, Daniel said. Mr. Walker delivered a functioning design, charged us fairly, and recommended Apex Meridian as the corporation capable of scaling it. Claire's eyes lifted toward me. Daniel continued. Apex did not introduce Walker Precision to Northbridge. Walker Precision introduced Apex to us. The room changed without anyone moving. Brent looked at Claire. She stared at the photograph as if it belonged to a life she had misplaced. Daniel opened the original agreement. We accepted Apex on the condition that Walker Precision retained design ownership and independent validation authority. Those requirements were not outdated. They were the reason we trusted the arrangement. The Northbridge compliance officer then presented the server access records. The failed requests traced back to an Apex engineering manager acting under a written instruction from Brent's office. A second document showed Claire had been copied on the contingency supplier plan 3 weeks before the gala. She had not approved the server access or the false certificate, but she had known Apex intended to replace my company before asking me to surrender the design. Daniel turned to her. Mrs. Walker, did your husband verbally approve this transition? Claire looked at Brent, then at me. Her fingers rested flat against the polished table. For years, she had known how to make uncertain language sound decisive. This time, she spoke without decoration. No, he did not. Brent shifted in his chair. Claire, consider the full context. She did not look at him. He refused from the beginning. Daniel nodded once. Thank you. The Northbridge board withdrew for 14 minutes. Nobody spoke while they were gone. I watched clouds pass beyond the windows and thought about the first shop, the leaking roof, and the sign Claire had painted by hand. When Daniel returned, he read the decision in a steady voice. Northbridge was terminating its distribution agreement with Apex Meridian for unauthorized use of protected intellectual property, falsified validation records, and breach of material safety procedures. All pending payments would remain suspended during reconciliation. Future production would be transferred to a supplier group operating under Walker Precision's technical authority. Brent's face lost the confidence it had carried into the room. Claire closed her eyes for one brief second. My phone began vibrating on the table before Daniel finished speaking. Department managers, suppliers, reporters. I ignored every call. At 11:47 that night, Claire finally reached me from her office and asked what I had done. Standing beneath the humming lights of my small shop, I gave her the only answer I had left. I told them the truth. Claire came home after 1 in the morning. I was still at the kitchen table, not because I had been waiting for an argument, but because I could not sleep inside a house that suddenly felt like evidence from another life. She placed her company identification card beside her purse and stood across from me without removing her coat. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The clock above the stove filled the silence one measured second at a time. Brent has been suspended, she said. The board placed 3 executives on administrative leave. My division will probably be dissolved. I nodded. I heard. Her eyes moved across the kitchen, pausing on the cabinet we had painted together when we bought the house. Are you happy? She asked. No, you got everything you wanted. I wanted them to stop using my name on work I did not approve. Northbridge is giving you the program. They are transferring technical authority to a supplier group. That is not the same thing. Her expression tightened. Your company will double in size. Maybe. And mine may disappear. I rested both hands on the table. Claire, Apex did not lose Northbridge because I owned a contract clause. They lost Northbridge because people decided the truth was less convenient than the schedule. You could have warned me before you sent the records. I warned you at the restaurant. You could have told me how much influence you had. There it was, the question waiting beneath every other question. Why had I not shown her that I mattered before she laughed? I looked toward the hallway, where an old photograph hung beside the thermostat. Claire and I stood in front of the first shop, younger and tired, with paint on our clothes and hope written plainly across our faces. I never needed you to admire me, I said. I needed you not to be ashamed of me. Her face softened, but I had spent too many years mistaking temporary softness for change. I was not ashamed, she said. You introduced me as a hobbyist in front of your colleagues. I was trying to fit into that room. By making sure I did not. She lowered herself into the chair across from me. I did not know you were the reason Apex got Northbridge. You were there when Daniel brought us the first prototype. That was 11 years ago. You helped me find the alloy. I did not know you recommended Apex. I thought it was our success. I did not think I needed to keep a receipt for it. She looked down at her identification card. Why did you let everyone believe I brought the account in? Because you worked hard, and I loved seeing people recognize you. The words did not repair anything. They only made the distance between us easier to measure. Claire covered her face for a moment, then straightened. I made choices I cannot explain without sounding selfish. Then explain them honestly. I liked being respected. So did I. That answer left nothing for her to argue with. We spoke until the sky began to lighten beyond the kitchen window. There was no shouting, no dramatic promise, and no single apology large enough to carry the weight of the years behind it. Claire admitted she had known Apex planned to replace Walker Precision. She told herself the transition was inevitable and that my refusal came from pride. I admitted that I had allowed resentment to collect in silence because confronting it felt harder than working another 12-hour day. By sunrise, we both understood the marriage had not ended in the conference room. It had been wearing away quietly every time one of us chose comfort over truth. 2 weeks later, Claire moved into an apartment near downtown Columbus. We filed for separation through attorneys who kept the process calm and private. Brent was dismissed after the internal investigation confirmed he had authorized the copied design and false validation certificate. Claire kept her job temporarily, but resigned before the division closed. She later accepted a position with a smaller logistics company, far from executive floors and gala speeches. 6 months passed. Walker Precision expanded from 12 employees to 24. But I refused Daniel's first proposal to triple production immediately. We added 1 shift, purchased 2 machines, and partnered with suppliers whose records could survive inspection. Megan became director of quality. Luis trained 5 new machinists. Rachel's daughter received her college acceptance letter. And the entire shop celebrated with grocery store cake in the break room. On a Friday afternoon, I handed out the first performance bonuses under the Northbridge agreement. Then I walked outside and looked at our old sign. The paint had faded, and 1 corner had begun to rust. A sign company had offered to replace it with polished steel letters 6 feet wide. I declined. We repaired the corner, cleaned the surface, and hung it back where it had always been. The building was still small. The parking lot still held only 12 spaces. The loading door still complained whenever the Ohio wind came from the west. None of that embarrassed me anymore. At 5:30, the last machine went quiet. I locked the front door and stood beneath the name Claire had once painted by hand. Small had never meant unimportant. It had only meant every promise was close enough to know by name.